Hi everyone, and welcome to our program, which we call it Talk with a Scientist. This is a program where we invite PhD students from all over the world to share with us their experience in their PhD. So today we have a very special guest. We have Elizabeth. She is in neuroscience, and I think we want to let her talk about herself more. So Elizabeth, welcome, and can you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I am a sixth-year neuroscience PhD candidate. I'm in New York in the United States, and I am focusing on studying addiction and how it changes the brain in a particular region that I study, which I can talk about at a later point if you want.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Elizabeth. So our first question is, why did you want to do a PhD? Was it something from the beginning, or just the idea come after finishing your master's?
So I actually did not complete a master's. In the United States, it's not required to have a master's degree to actually obtain a PhD. I was lucky enough in my undergraduate degree to have a lot of research with my advisor, and that research experience allowed me to actually gain acceptance into a PhD program right from undergrad. So I was very lucky in that instance. Um, in terms of wanting to do a PhD, I didn't necessarily want to do a PhD. I wanted to be a scientist. I've always kind of known that I wanted to be a scientist. I don't know if you know Jane Goodall, if you've ever heard of her before. She's like the lady who did like the chimpanzee work and was like kind of out in nature and kind of like studying, kind of like ecology work. And I watched a lot of nature shows when I was little, and that really jump started my brain into wanting to actually be one of those people that went out and researched things. And so I thought I wanted to be kind of like an environmentalist first, kind of someone who went out into the field. But it turned out that I wanted to focus more on impacting human health and discovering, therapies and mechanisms that would better our lives instead of environmental aspects.
Thank you. So I did a small research about neuroscience because here in Algeria, in my country, I don't believe that we have this field of study here. So this is something new to us. If you can explain more about what is to be neuroscience, I mean, I guess there is some similarities between neuroscience and biology or something like this.
Right. So, sure, I can explain what it means to specifically study neuroscience. So, if you're in biology, you will understand the mechanisms of protein interactions, you'll understand cellular interactions, how different organs in the body work, for example. But if you're in neuroscience, you're focused on specifically the brain, the central nervous system, and also the peripheral nervous system. And that can be in how that portion of the body interacts with the other parts of the body, or it can primarily just be studying the brain itself. And so for studying the brain, I focus on the brain. I'm a central nervous system focus. And so I basically look at the interactions of specific neurons in nuclei in the brain. And when you're in neuroscience, you kind of have to understand that the brain is made up of very many different regions. And there are regions of the brain that control eyesight. There's regions of the brain that control what you hear. There's regions of the brain that control your emotions. And so you basically, for your PhD, for example, you pick a region that you find intriguing and you do a project based on, some question that you find that you want to answer to investigate how some change happens in that region and how it impacts, in different situations, basically. So it's very like, central nervous system focused or peripheral nervous system focused. You have to understand what a neuron is. You have to understand how they communicate throughout the brain, and you have to do a lot of anatomy as well to understand the different parts of the brain.
So it is like a combination between biology and medicinal studies.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So from where you said, I think the neuroscience are the people who will find maybe the cure to Alzheimer's disease.
Mm-hmm. Right. A lot of neurodegenerative diseases. That's one of my passions, actually, is I would like to focus on that aspect in the future, as I have Parkinson's disease in my family. A few family members have passed away from it, so that has impacted me and definitely pushed me to want to look into those diseases.
It's a very wonderful field to study. Uh, so let's talk about supervising. I mean, first of all, the project you are working on, is it proposed by your supervisor or it's your own proposal?
So the project that I'm working on was a combination of the two. We were at a conference, my supervisor and I, we were at a conference, and we ran into another lab that came to our poster. And all of a sudden, a month later after the conference, we had a collaboration started. And so it was a kind of like a baby between our lab and their lab. And then they kind of handed me the project, and I kind of took that idea and ran with it. So the basis of the idea was developed by my advisor and our collaborators, but I kind of ran with that and developed the experiments to outline that idea.
Uh, when we talk about graduation, when you are a PhD, you are in your sixth year, I guess, yeah?
Yeah.
So is it necessary to publish a paper to graduate, or no, just you can graduate whenever you want?
So different programs require you to publish a paper or not to publish a paper. It's variable by what school you're in, basically. So my school does not require you to publish a paper. I have had a few papers come out that I was collaborating with while I have been during like my degree, but it wasn't necessarily my thesis work. I am writing up a paper right now for my thesis work, but it's not a requirement to actually publish it before I graduate. I will, obviously, but it's not a requirement.
Relation between the supervisor and the co-supervisor and the PhD candidate. I mean, how is it the supervising system or protocol?
So the relationship between supervisor and student is pretty variable depending on what the supervisor is like, I guess. Some of them are very hands-on and they will be in the lab with you. Some are very hands-off and you'll never see them except for occasional meetings where you update them on your progress. My supervisor is pretty hands-on. He will come in the lab if you need him to help you troubleshoot things. And I think we have a really good relationship. It's really important when you're, starting a PhD to make sure that you have a compatible relationship with your supervisor, because that kind of dictates your entire trajectory of your PhD. And if it's an uncomfortable relationship, it's going to be a really rough ride.
So if we're going to talk about techniques that I don't know, but me as an organic chemistry student, when I synthesize some molecule, I need to identify this molecule. I need to make sure that I did synthesize the target molecule. So what about neuroscience? Do you have some techniques like this? For example, we use NMR, we use mass spectrometry. Yeah. So what about your neuroscience?
So there's a pretty specific technique that is exciting that I use that's primarily used for neuroscience because it records the electrical activity of neurons, which is specific because not many other cells in the body have electrical activity. The only other cell in the body is cardiomyocytes in the heart. So this technique is in common between the cardiovascular field as well as neuroscience, but it's called electrophysiology. And basically, I'm able to record from a single neuron in the brain. I can take a very small glass electrode that has a silver chloride wire inside of it and attach that to a single neuron and actually record that specific neuron's activity in different situations. From, let's say I put a different compound on it, see how it reacts to that, for example. And it's a really powerful technique. And so you will identify a compound using mass spec or you use NMR. We can identify a neuron a specific neuron, different neurons in the brain will fire and have different electrical parameters that you can be like, I know that that's a glutamatergic neuron. I know that's a GABAergic neuron. Or for me, I know that I am recording from orexin neurons because they have specific electrical signatures.
So it is more like you can say the same protocol when we compare, for example, NMR or infrared, for example. When you shoot the radiation to a molecule, every molecule and every atom will vibrate on their own.
Mm-hmm.
All of them, they have their specific vibration. So it is like in neurons.
Yeah, exactly. We all have our specific way to identify the compound or molecule that we're working on.
So talking about these techniques, do you have the permission to use these machines, or you have to wait for the lab technician?
So I am fully in control of my electrophysiology rig. That you call it a rig. It's basically a microscope that has a fluorescence beam connected to the top of it, and all of that is sitting on a table that is isolated using gas from the other, vibrations in the room, so that there's no, interference while you're recording from that single neuron, because it's so small you don't want your pipette moving. And so I am in control of maintenance on that rig. I set it up, I run it. It's our lab, so I don't have to wait for anyone else to use it or set it up for me.
Okay. It's really helpful to PhD candidates. So during your PhD experience, have you ever faced a problem with the lack of products or something like this?
In terms of like waiting for something to come in, like ordering?
Yeah.
Definitely. So during the start of the pandemic, during that entire year, I think a lot of us noticed that pipette tips were extremely hard to get, especially the filtered ones, because, they were being used regularly for all the PCR tests being done for the COVID tests. So that caused pretty big problem the past 2 years, I would have to say. But luckily, we have our supplies back to normal now.
So finally, this was what what will be your project after finishing your PhD?
So the goal after finishing my PhD is to become in a leadership role, as obtaining a doctorate degree allows you to do that. And I would like to run a lab or a research group and investigate neurological diseases, specifically the neurodegenerative diseases. So I would like to, yes, still be in the lab, but be more in control of directing the directions of the research and asking the research questions that I can help those under me follow. I'm probably going to be in industry or the pharmaceutical companies. I'm probably not going to be staying in academia.
I hope you will reach your dream soon.
Thank you.
So speaking of labs, do you have some collaboration with other fields? For example, not speaking of biology, but for example, chemistry. Do you have a collaboration with them?
So currently we do not. Like I said, we do have a collaborator, but they are also in biology, specifically neuroscience field. They just don't do the techniques that we do. So right now we don't. A lot of labs do collaborate with, for example, companies that make compounds so that they can test them on their systems and validate them. And that's pretty common, and there are a bunch of labs at my school that do that.
Okay. So this was our final question. We would like to thank you, Elizabeth, and maybe we will have you soon.
Of course, I'd love to.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So bye.
Nice to meet you. Bye.
Nice.